And these two Viennese dances are sort of an homage to his hometown of Vienna in Austria. Like most Viennese dances, they are waltzes. The first one is called Schön Rosmarin, and the second one is a little more melancholy. It's called Liebeslied. So we're very happy to be here, and welcome to my friend Mads Tolling.
Good morning. Welcome to Carmel Valley Community Chapel. It's great to have you all with us this morning. And you already know you're in for a musical treat with Ian Scarf and Mads Tolling. I'll say a little bit more about them a little later. But for now, I want to thank Wayne Clark for being our liturgist, Holly Thompson for being our deacon to the diaspora, and today our cantor, and Rich Cheatham for being our audio-visual tech person this morning. At this point in the service, I invite all who are able to please stand and join responsively in the call to worship printed in the bulletin.
Rise, shine, your light has come.
The shining of the divine has dawned upon us. Raise your eyes all around and see. The source of light and love has lit a flame within us.
All our relations, all generations gather in this circle of brightness.
May we, in our own time and place, be among those who kindle light. So this morning, we have two hymns with very similar titles. Arise, your light is come. Arise, shine out, your light has come. Both of those hymn texts are reflections on Isaiah 60, which is very close, at least in spirit, to our text for this morning from Isaiah 43. And it was just the musical nerd in me that decided to have both of them in this service today, because the words are written by two contemporary authors of hymn texts, Ruth Duck and Brian Wren, and they come up with very different very different texts that are both based on the same biblical text from Isaiah 60. And the musical tunes that are used are different and has a completely different feeling. So it's just a wonderful expression of the difference that the music, the melody, the harmony, the rhythm can make when these two hymns are basically talking about the same thing. So let's sing together hymn number, it's the song sheet, Arise, Your Light is Come.
Arise, your light is come, the Spirit's
Please be seated. Before we begin our meditation time, I just want to give a few words about the backgrounds of our two musicians. Ian Scarf has been here a couple times before, and I think you all remember him. If you don't, he is a soloist, collaborator, accompanist, educator, lecturer, concert organizer, and more. He was actually here this weekend because he did a brief discussion of the music at Sunset Center last night. He's founder and director of the Trinity Alps Chamber Music Festival that has presented diverse programs with dozens of musicians in over 300 free public concerts and school programs across communities and schools in rural Northern California and Oregon. He's a founding member of several ensembles, including the Vinifera Trio in California's Bay Area and the Zurich Beethoven Trio in Switzerland. And he's currently on staff as music associate at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, where he earned a master's degree in 2008 and an artist certificate in 2010. Mads Tolling, first time at the chapel. Mads began learning the violin at age 6, if I remember the story correctly. And he later did some work at the Berklee College, where he graduated with a degree in music. He is an internationally renowned pianist and composer, originally from Copenhagen, Denmark, now living in San Francisco. He worked with former 9-year member of both, as a former member for 9 years, of both bassist Stanley Clark's band and the celebrated Turtle Island Quartet. And Mads has won 2 Grammy Awards, along with being nominated for a 3rd as recently as 2015. In 2016, he was the winner of the Downbeat Critics Poll Rising Star Violin Award. He's performed with Chick Corea, Ramsey Lewis, Kenny Barron, Paquito de Rivera, Leo Kottke, and Sergio and Oder Assad. He's currently a member of Bob Weir's Wolf Bros and Wolfpack Band. If you want to know more, you'll have to ask him about it after the service. You might also ask him how it felt to perform for Danish royalty, Prince Frederik and Princess Mary, at the celebration of the Danish Embassy's 50th year anniversary. He's been commissioned twice to write violin concertos for the Oakland Symphony and for the Pacific Chamber Orchestra. He's performed symphonic works and soloed with orchestras around the US and in Japan. And he's now leading 2 of his own groups, in addition to his showing up here as a duet with Ian, the Mads Tolling Quartet and Mads Tolling and the Madsmen. And if you Google Mads Tolling and the Madsmen on YouTube, you will find some wonderful music videos to listen to. So thank you, Ian and Mads, for being with us this morning. And now at this point in our service, I invite us all to join together in a few moments of silent meditation. I invite you to take this time to center your heart, your mind, your body, and your spirit into this time that we are creating for one another together here and now. Let us join together in silent meditation. Thank you, Mads and Ian. What a beautiful piece. Our reading for today comes from the book of the prophet Isaiah. It is indeed one of my favorite scriptures. This portion of Isaiah is the part that Isaiah scholars refer to as Second Isaiah. It comes from a time in the 6th century BCE, probably late in the 6th century, when the Jewish people in exile living in Babylon began to hear words of hope and promise that they might return to their ancestral homeland. Now, at this time, a very successful and ambitious military commander named Cyrus, also known as King Cyrus, started conquering the city-states in what is now known Iran and Syria, eventually leading to his conquest over the Babylonians. Cyrus would eventually, as king, grant the Israelites in Babylon their freedom and allow them to return home and rebuild their lives and their temple in Jerusalem. A few chapters after what we hear today, in chapter 45 of Isaiah, Cyrus is actually referred to as God's Messiah, or anointed one, the one whom God had called by name for the sake of Jacob and Israel. And this is an echo of something you'll hear in this reading from Isaiah 43, where through the prophet, God says to Jacob and Israel, I have called you by name. You are mine. The reading goes on to talk about other nations like Egypt, Nubia, and Saba as being ransom in return for the freedom of Jacob and Israel. Now, I used to think, well, that's not very nice, God playing sides like that. But I've come to think that this simply is a reflection of what's happening at the time in the politics of their world. Cyrus was conquering other nations all around him and building up an empire. And at the same time, he was allowing the exiled Israelites in his realm to go free back to their home. But as you hear this, please don't forget that this is trauma literature. And the beautiful and reassuring parts of the text that you will hear must have been very powerful, perhaps even emotionally overwhelming to a people that had suffered so much trauma and devastation. So as you hear it this morning, try to put yourself a little bit in their place as you hear these words of hope, consolation, and assurance of the presence of the divine. Let's take a listen to the reading for today.
From Isaiah chapter 43, verses 1 through 7. And now, thus said Adonai, your creator, Jacob, and your fashioner, Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, you are mine. Should you pass through water, I am with you, and through rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. Should you walk through fire, you shall not be singed, and flames shall not burn you. For I am Adonai, your God, Israel's Holy One, your rescuer. I have made Egypt your ransom, Nubia and Saba in your stead. For you are precious in my eyes, you are honored, and I love you. And I put people in your stead and nations instead of your life. And do not fear, for I am with you. From the cast I will bring you seed. From the east I will bring you seed. And from the west I will gather you. And I will say to the north, give them up. And to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth, all who are called by my name, and for my shining I created them. I fashioned them. Yes, I made them. Thus reads the reading. Thank you.
Let us join together in singing hymn number 725 in the hymnal, Arise, Shine Out, Your Light Has Come.
Arise, shine on,
So today, folks, we are in the season of Epiphany. Happy Epiphany. We are also in the beginning of the Mardi Gras season, which will continue until Lent begins in March. Epiphany literally means, quote, to bring to light or to make manifest. And it refers to a revealing or illuminating of reality, a happening, an event in which we begin to recognize the presence of the divine, the presence of love within us. And we will be in this season of Epiphany until March 5th. Now, there are three rather, I think, familiar stories that come up front and center during this season. One is the journey of the Magi. You may be familiar with them more as the story of the three kings. Another is a story in the Gospels about the baptism of Jesus. Another is a story of a wedding that happens in a little town called Cana. Our reading from Isaiah 43 fits into the Epiphany theme as well, because it is the revelation that God is with us through all the rivers we have to cross and all the fires we must walk through. Kind of relevant for today, right? With all the devastating and tragic fires raging in Southern California. And Epiphany says God will be with us, not only through the fire, but in the repairing and the healing and the recovery that is to come. This week, as I reflected on these themes and this service for this morning, I took a look anew at a poem that I've known and loved for a long time. And it fits right in with the Epiphany theme, because it is a very creative reimagining of the gospel story from Matthew that we would have heard last Monday, which was the day of Epiphany, if we had had a service on Monday. This poem was written by T.S. Eliot. It's titled Journey of the Magi. Now, recently I've read more commentaries on this poem than I want to tell you. All of them, in different ways, used what I consider to be very traditional theological ideas from the early 20th century. And that makes sense. That was Eliot's time. That would be closest way of his theological worldview. But as I read and reread this poem many times, I started to wonder, what new gems, new insights, new shinings might we find if instead of the old traditional language, we looked at it through a more modern lens, specifically through the lens of process theology. So what I want to do this morning is to read the poem, make some commentary based on process thought, and then read the poem a second time. So here is The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter. And the camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out and the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end, we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, singing, "This was all folly." Then, at dawn, we came down to a temperate valley, wet, below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a watermill beating the darkness, and 3 trees on the low sky, and an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, 6 hands at an open door, dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wineskins. But there was no information, and so we continued, and arrived at evening not a moment too soon, finding the place. It was, you may say, satisfactory. Oh, this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again, but set down. This set down. This. Were we led all that way for birth or death? There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence, and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death. That's a remarkable poem. If you're not familiar with it, and if you know the story from Matthew about the Magi, or at least the Christmas pageant version of it, maybe it wasn't the poem you were expecting to hear. It carries a sense of struggle, hardship, weight, and maybe even alienation. The first 5 lines of the poem are in quotation marks. That's because they were copied by Eliot from a 1622 sermon by a well-known bishop of the Anglican Church, Lancelot Andrewes. And here's what Andrewes said towards the end of his sermon, which was focusing on the Magi's journey to see the infant Jesus. Quote, "Last, we consider the time of their coming, the season of the year. It was no summer progress. A cold coming they had of it at this time of year. Just the worst time of the year to take a journey, and especially a long journey. The ways deep, the weather sharp, the days short, the sun farthest off, in solstitio brumali, the very dead of winter." End quote. Now, Eliot was well versed in Andrewes' writings. But what sings out to me here is the connection between the two. Andrews died centuries before Eliot was born. Yet his life and work still lived in Eliot's mind and found its way into this 20th century poem. The first thing I want to share with you about process theology, it is keenly aware of the interconnectedness of life. And there are very many theologies that pass as Christian theology that are not very aware of the interconnectedness of life. J. McDaniel, in his book, What is Process Thought, writes, quote, "The universe as a whole is a seamless web of interconnected events, none of which can be separated from the others. Everything is connected to everything else and contained in everything else." Unquote. And right at the beginning of Eliot's poem, there is a connection, an explicit connection between Andrews and Eliot, front and center. A 17th century bishop shows up in a 20th century poem. And the major theme of this quotation and of the poem is the journey, the long, hard journey. J. McDaniel writes, quote, "Human life is itself a journey from birth, and perhaps before, to death, and perhaps after. And the journey is itself a process of character development over time," end quote. This process, this journey, is for Eliot a deep way, a long way, a hard way. And the theme of death makes itself clear in the 5th line of the poem, what ends the quotation. Quote, "The very dead of winter," end quote. Process theology is often just summed up as, well, this is a theology that's all about process. And that's true. But the idea of life and theology and everything as a process isn't even the beginning. It's a part of it. One of the, I think, most important aspects of this theology is the interconnectedness and how seriously and thoroughly process theology minds the interconnectedness of life and of all of us. It also affirms something referred to as the causal efficacy of experience, which is to say this, from Daniel's quote, "Human experience is not limited to acting on things or actively interpreting a passive world. It begins by a conscious and unconscious receiving of events into life and being, causally affected or influenced by what is received. This occurs through the mediation of the body, but can also occur through a reception of the moods and feelings of other people and animals." Unquote. And Eliot expresses that in his description. The refractory camels, which is a fancy word for stubborn. The experience of cold, of winter, of melting snow, the memories of summer palaces, the lack of shelter, the hostile cities, dirty villages, etc., etc. All of this is being received by Eliot and by the fictional magi in the poem, and is the causal efficacy of human experience. Now, the next thing that I want to comment on is almost guaranteed to happen if process theology is appropriate for this poem. And that is this. Toward the end of the poem, new things emerge. The Magi decide to travel at night. They had been traveling by day before. They come to a temperate valley at dawn. Now, the temperate valley is completely new and different from what they had been experiencing. And dawn is an image of awakening to the new day. They are experiencing a new, more hospitable environment. And they're taking it in. J. McDaniels writes, quote, "A human life unfolds over time, moment by moment, and in every moment, a new self emerges that did not exist beforehand. No matter how difficult a situation, there is always a window of possibility for creatively responding to the situation at hand, and thus making something new out of the old." End quote. I wonder if when you heard the poem read this morning, what your reaction was, what your experience was, how you took in the surprisingly enigmatic and anticlimactic experience in the poem of the Magi arriving at the place they had been journeying to throughout the poem. If you forget, here's how they responded. Quote from Eliot's poem, "So we continued and arrived at evening, not a moment too soon, finding the place. It was, you may say, satisfactory." I mean, a couple times when I read that poem, that part kind of jumped out at me and made me snicker a little bit. It's not what I would expect from showing up at Bethlehem to see the infant Christ child, you know? But what if the destination was never the point? Perhaps the journey was actually what was the more profound internal and life-changing experience. I think that seems likely, especially given the closing lines of the poem. The closing lines of the poem echoing something that happened at the very beginning on the 5th line. The closing line said, "This is about birth and death that led them all that way." That's what the whole journey was about. In true process theology style, this is, to borrow the words of McDaniel, about complementary thinking. Sorry about the big name. Here's what it means. Quote, "The rational life consists not only of identifying facts and appealing to evidence, but taking apparently conflicting ideas and showing how they can be woven into wholes." Wholes spelled with a W-H. with each side contributing to the other. End quote. It's about weaving the contradictions together, respecting both experiences. The poet is embracing the ambiguity of seeming opposites and bringing them together in a way that for him is new and novel and profound. And it creates a new world for them to live in. Because the Magi return home at the end of the poem. But it is clear that that home is not the same as the one they left when their journey began. Because they are not the same. A few more quotes from McDaniel. Thus, the value of our lives is not simply what we make of our lives. It is also what we receive into our lives. In process thought, value is not simply a human projection onto a blank slate. It is something that is found in other people and also throughout the natural world. So let's listen again to this poem by T.S. Eliot, The Journey of the Magi. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of year for a journey, and such a long journey. The ways deep, the weather sharp, the very dead of winter. And the camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women. And the night fires going out, and the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile, and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end, we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. Then at dawn, we came down to a temperate valley, wet, below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a watermill beating the darkness, and 3 trees on the low sky. And an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel. 6 hands at an open door dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wineskins. But there was no information, and so we continued, and arrived at evening, not a moment too soon. Finding the place, it was, you may say, satisfactory. All this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again, but set down, this, were we led all that way for birth or death? There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence, and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our places. these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death.
Let us give in the spirit of generosity and joy. Please give as you are able.
Well, we're going to play a little something that I wrote here. So just a little background is that I'm from Copenhagen, Denmark, and started playing violin at age 6 years old. My sister and I, we both learned the violin in Copenhagen and Suzuki method. And about 9, 10 years old, we would play in the streets of Copenhagen kind of busking. So that was a big part of my upbringing while I was studying classical music. So I kind of got into the folk music side of things and eventually got into jazz. So this next piece has a little bit of folk and jazz influences for sure. And it's a piece that I like to dedicate to my mother because it's actually has to do with her, because she would make me this really delicious dessert, especially in the summertime over there. And the dessert has a very unusual and typically Danish name. The name is rødgrød med fløde. Rødgrød med fløde, which basically means berry reduction with cream. It's very delicious. And I've been teaching Ian how to say it, although he's a work in progress. To make it a little easier for my American friends, I decided to go with the title Danish Dessert. So here it is. Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
right.
Everything that we have, everything that we are, every moment is a blessing from above. It's endless love that we breathe, it's endless love that we receive. What has freely come, we now let freely go.
O God, through the offering of these gifts, may we become more open people, open-minded in hearing your word and wisdom, open-hearted in healing a broken world, open-handed in heeding your call for charity and enacted love. With thanks for all good gifts, we present a portion of our substance and the whole of ourselves. Amen.
Please be seated. I don't know what the hell this is. At this point in our service, I invite us all into a time of sharing our joys and our concerns with the congregation. If there's anything that you'd like to share with us, please raise your hand, get my attention. I'll bring the microphone to you. And if there's any way in which we might respond in solidarity with your sharing, let us know by quoting something that we can repeat, like "Thanks be to God," or "God hear our prayers," or "Blessed be," or whatever. Is there anything that folks have to share this morning?
I'll start.
Okay.
Because it was so very hard to get up this morning, and I said, can I do this? And so there was a journey involved. And when I got here, there was a birth. Oh my gosh, what wonderful music, so delightful. Had a wonderful, wonderful time, and can't wait to have you come back. Hope you never stop. I remember thinking, I hope this never ends. Let's keep going. Let's do more with this journey. So thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks be to God. Judy. Okay, you go first, Wayne.
Well, I want to thank Judy and Dan Riley and also Pastor Rick for arranging this wonderful event, and Judy and Dan housing these folks as they came here for the weekend. It really was a wonderful opportunity to have some fantastic music by some great artists. I appreciate it. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Say that the interconnectedness that you were talking about, I think that this is one of the most wonderful things through music, through Rick, through meeting all of these wonderful guests that we have. Thanks be to God that they are able to get together through interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks be to God. If there's nothing else that folks wish to share this morning, I invite us into a brief time of silent prayer together. After a little bit of time has gone by, I'll invite us all to join in saying a new paraphrased version of the prayer of Jesus that's printed in the bulletin. It is also a prayer, interpretation of the prayer in process theology terminology. That's kind of cool. Let's join together now for a time of silent prayer. Gracious Spirit, we thank you for your presence with us throughout our lives, for our connections to one another that are insoluble, and for the strength and the power to make it through the hard times, to walk through the waters, to walk through the fires, and to come out on the other side with a new vision of who we are and how to live. Our thoughts and our prayers especially go to all those in Southern California dealing with such tragic loss and trauma. For the brave firefighters that are working in dangerous situations. May the winds be gentle, and may the water flow, and may your Spirit be with us all. Hear us now as we say this new version of that ancient prayer that our brother Jesus taught us to pray, saying, Everlasting Abba, Ima, whose name is holy. When our aims kiss, communion exists in this living world here and now. Provide us today with enough food, clothing, and shelter for tomorrow. And as we forgive the debts of others, we believe our debts are forgiven. To prevent despair, harmonize good and evil. For in faith, hope, and love are we called forward into a beautiful commonwealth of justice, freedom, and peace forever. Amen. It's the time for any announcements that folks have to make. I would just draw your attention to the two that are in the bulletin. This Tuesday, there will be a pre-recorded meditation service link going out to everyone on the email list, and you can view it at any time that you wish. And this Thursday, January 16th at 1:30 in the afternoon, we begin our discussion of the book, The Songs of Trees. I'm very excited about this book. It's a journey all over the world. Each chapter takes place in a different location and deals with the life and the songs of trees in different dimensions with each chapter. One chapter we'll get to put our toes in the water of Shinto religion in Japan, which is something I don't know much about, so I'm looking forward to that discussion. So I hope you'll join us. You do need to let me know so that I put you on the email list that will receive the link for the Zoom session, which will be every Thursday at 1:30, will ending at 3 p.m.
Please sign me up for that. During the pandemic, Zoom was something that we all groaned over. It was all we had. Now Zoom is something that we have in cases of a diaspora, ways to participate, when maybe you couldn't be personally there, and opportunities to get to know people that you would not know otherwise very well, because we spend an hour and a half with each other every week, and it's going to be very fun and exciting.
Thanks, Holly. And you're already on the list.
Okay.
But anybody else, do not tell me. Write it down or I will forget. It's my superpower. If there's nothing else that folks have to announce.
What about the meeting tomorrow?
Oh, yes, and I didn't announce that because I can't go. I've got a meeting with the Composers Forum that I have to lead tomorrow. So 6 o'clock, and it's on Zoom, right?
Oh, this is the meeting to plan the fundraiser.
Fundraisers, plural.
Fundraisers.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. And anybody is welcome if you want to, give your ideas and volunteer to help a little bit. We need all the helpers we can get. So, if there's nothing else now that folks have to share, I invite us all who are able to stand and join in singing our closing hymn, This Little Light of Mine, number 585.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine.
May you go forth this day with the light of love shining within you. May you go forth this day knowing that you journey connected, enmeshed, intertwined with all your fellow travelers in life, human and otherwise. May you go forth this day to trust the Spirit of that mystery that we call God, to be with you always, a bridge uniting you, bringing together all the contradictions of your life. Go forth this day in peace.